This is one of the very few opportunities to go against Haaland captaincy this season, but is it worth it? Let's analyse the data to find out. The man himself has a difficult fixture against Newcastle, but at least it's at the Etihad. But to be fair, his nemesis Salah gets to play at Anfield, and that's in an easy fixture against Bournemouth. And lastly, Saka against Palace away. If I was going for a completely differential captain, it would be him. Unfortunately for him, he's the only player on the shortlist that doesn't have the home advantage this game week, but at least he gets an extra point per goal scored in comparison to Haaland, and he's got the clean sheet point potential as well. That also applies to Salah, and that's because they're both midfielders. We'll start by taking a look at the non-penalty stats per 90 minutes for this season. We can already see that Haaland's off to a flyer, but it's worth noting that this is based on a small sample size of just one fixture. To be fair to Haaland, his non-penalty return points and expected return points per 90 minutes were better than Salah's and Saka's last season anyway, with the expected return points being better at projecting the future return points than the actual return points themselves. A key takeaway from this is that Saka wasn't very lively in his first fixture, and those stats aren't promising. But like I mentioned earlier, that's based on a small sample size, so I wouldn't look into it too much. That's the non-penalty data. As for the penalty data, none of these players benefit over any of the other players because they're all on penalty duties. There is something to separate them on the rest of the set pieces though. Saka's the main man on indirect free kicks and corners at Arsenal. Salah does take the occasional direct free kick for Liverpool, but Trent's the main man. As for Haaland, he doesn't take any free kicks or corners whatsoever. To be fair to the Norwegian, he's still got the joint highest anytime goal scorer odds, and that's with Salah, but Salah also has the highest anytime assist odds, which means Salah's got the highest anytime return odds overall. Don't forget that Salah gets an additional point for every goal scored in comparison to Haaland, so the weighted odds are even better than the odds on the screen. This is displayed through the points projections, where Salah's got the highest on FPL Review with 7.5 and the highest on Fantasy Football Fix with 7. You'll see another factor soon that's bringing down Haaland's points projections, but it's open to interpretation, so it's up to you how much weighting you apply to it. Before I reveal what that factor is, we're going to compare the opposition's defence. At first, it does seem surprising that Newcastle have got the worst defensive numbers, especially in comparison to Bournemouth. I say that because Newcastle had the joint least amount of goals conceded last season, and out of all the teams remaining in the Premier League, Bournemouth conceded the most. Obviously, like I said when we was comparing the players, don't look into it too much because it is based on a small sample size of one game, but to be fair, if we do look into it, Newcastle had the toughest fixture against Villa, they've got the worst numbers. Palace had the easiest fixture against Sheffield United, they've got the best numbers, and that explains it. It's worth paying more attention to the clean sheet odds this game week. Salah's opponents Bournemouth have only got a 5% probability. As for Haaland's opponents Newcastle, they're more than twice as likely to keep a clean sheet than Bournemouth with 13%. As for Saka's opponents Palace, they're 3 times more likely to keep a clean sheet than Bournemouth. It's fair to say that Salah's got the easiest fixture. I know Newcastle have got the second best clean sheet odds, but I would say that's the most difficult fixture. It's just that City's attack is so good it brings the clean sheet odds down, and City have got the home advantage as well. The second easiest I'd say Palace away. Before we draw up a conclusion, let's carry out a quick risk assessment. It's not ideal that Haaland played midweek in the Super Cup just 3 days before this fixture, and that brings down his expected minutes. This is the other factor that I mentioned earlier that brings down his points projections, but it's up to you how you read into it. Obviously he could still play 90 minutes, we've seen it done in the past. He did feature for 90 minutes in that match, and you could look at it either way. You could say that he needs to come off earlier in the next match, or you could say that it's promising that he played 90 minutes, and that can definitely be said about Saka, but it can't be said about Salah. The Egyptian was dragged off 77 minutes into the game, and he spat his dummy out. Again, just like Haaland, you can make of that what you will. I don't think it will impact his probability of starting this match, or his probability of getting subbed off, and you can see that in his expected minutes. Based on all the data that I've seen, I believe Salah's the best captain. If you've made it to this point in the video, you've clearly found it informative. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any more videos like this.